After Zero Mission released, 2D Metroid basically died. Handhelds were the most obvious place to release 2D entries, but we instead got Prime Hunters, which somehow managed to be an FPS on DS. So if you prefer the 2D entries over the 3D ones like I do, you didn't really have much. Well, I say that, but we got the Prime Trilogy during this time, so it was pretty hard to complain. Metroid fans were eating good from 2002 until 2009, because in 2010, Metroid Other M released, which is indeed a video game. But I'm not here today to make fun of Other M. People didn't like it, it got bad reviews, so Nintendo just gotta pull the plug on the whole series, leading to a second Dark Age of Metroid. And this one was arguably worse because at least during the first big release gap, the only really good game was Super, but now we had a whole series of awesome times. When you know that a series you love clearly works and has at least moderate demand, it hurts when they just pretend it doesn't exist. I couldn't have truly known this pain at least. By the time another Metroid game came out, I was already a fan for years and I got into it midway through the hiatus. Luckily, if you wanted more of that Metroidvania gameplay, there was hardly a shortage of stuff to play. Cave Story, Axiom Verge, Guacamelee, there was probably a good DS Castlevania in there. Terraria kinda counts, freaking Hollow Knight, but it's not quite the same, you know? Those generic off-brand Oreos can only satisfy you for so long. Eventually, you need the real thing. And eventually, we would get a new Metroid game on 3DS. Metroid Prime Federation Force. And then we got Samus Returns a year later. Like, seriously, why does this game exist? It's some weird co-op shooter that literally no one was asking for. Yeah, it was well made, but most people just ignored it out of spite. It's not what we wanted. It would be like trying to revive The Legend of Dragoon with something akin to Panzer Dragoon. Like, what? E3 2017 almost felt like an apology for Federation Force. Boom, Prime 4. Boom, Metroid 2 Remake. Your grandkids are gonna love that first one. And Samus Returns was coming out in a few months? Hell yeah, sign me up. I was starving for anything new. I was so excited for it that I probably would have reviewed the game back when it came out if I could record 3DS games at the time.
But there will be 4 campaigns Shovel Knight. 12 divided by 4 is 3. Oh my god. Half-Life 3 confirmed.
Honestly, that's probably a blessing in disguise. A lot of other people seem pumped too, like, people were really excited for this. Why did no one buy this game? I get that the Switch was a few months old at that point, but it boggles my mind that Samus Returns sold as poorly as it did. We had people begging for a new game for years, and we finally got one, and it seems like no one played it. But hey, I did, and it was pretty awesome. But I replayed it about 2 years later, and I liked it considerably less. Design-wise, there were a lot of things I just didn't like after that hype of a new game wore off. Although I did play it after binging a bunch of other Metroid games, so maybe I was just getting burnt out from them. You could say the same thing about what I'm doing now, but I've been working on these since like February, and it's late August when I'm writing this, and late September when I'm recording this. So I've spaced them out much better than the last time I've played all these games. But maybe I'll enjoy myself a lot more if I take my time and play it at a more leisurely pace. Only one way to find out. Although Samus Returns is a 3DS game, and 3DS capture cards are virtually non-existent now, so I played through Samus Returns on an emulator. If you notice some slowdown, that's on me. On real hardware, Samus Returns plays at a pretty much locked 30 FPS. Citra doesn't seem to like AMD GPUs for some reason. And for some other reason, despite the fact that the game runs at 30 FPS, recording at 30 FPS was really choppy, and the only way to fix it was to ironically record at 60. Look, my point is, the footage isn't perfect, but it's the best I could do. Anyway, no more stalling. Samus Returns. I already went over this story in my Metroid 2 review. Everyone was sick of these stupid Metroids, so Samus has to murder all of them. Anyway, Samus Returns plays pretty similarly to Fusion. The jumps feel less snappy, but that's the only big difference. But unlike the original, you don't start off with a morph ball, even if you do get it pretty early. You can also aim in any direction with L now, instead of just diagonally. You can't move while doing this though, which isn't as big of a deal as it sounds. You move with the analog stick now, so moving and shooting diagonally isn't nearly as awkward to do. On paper, playing a 2D side-scroller with a stick sounds stupid. But with the 3DS's circle pad, it's fine. And besides, Metroid rarely makes you do any precise platforming, so you won't really notice it. The best new addition to the controls is the morph ball shortcut though. You've always had to press down when you're crouching, but now you can do it instantly. One problem, you activate it by touching the map on the touchscreen. It's so stupid and awkward that I forgot about it when I played it on the actual system, because having to move your hand and then quickly move it back to the circle pad is unintuitive. You use the touchscreen to switch weapons too, but it's not as bad because your other thumb can still let you move. but it's annoying, especially later in the game when you have to quickly switch to the grapple beam to stun certain Metroids. I get that the 3DS ran out of buttons, but on new 3DS, CL and ZR don't do anything. Why couldn't you just use those? It would have made things way less awkward. But luckily, we have technology. Essential lets you assign touchscreen coordinates to buttons, which means I can play Samus Returns like a normal video game, and this morph ball button is instantly amazing. Being able to easily ball right at the height of your jump gives you so much more precision. It's insane and I love it. Assigning the buttons to the right analog stick like Metroid Prime helped out too. I kinda wish the controls could be this smooth on 3DS because I don't want to go back, man. The morph ball button is too much fun. But beams stack now, so why do we need a weapon switcher? Well, they made the very perplexing decision to make the ice beam a separate weapon. And they didn't just nerf this thing, it's practically useless now. You can freeze enemies to use as platforms, but they stay frozen for barely any time unless you charge it. There was a point where I stopped using it entirely because I forgot I even had it. There's no point in using this thing, which is bizarre because the grapple beam isn't useless anymore. It can be used to quickly pull yourself toward grapple points or break these blocks. It gets a lot of use now, which just makes me question how they could do the ice beam so dirty. But despite being a remake, Samus Returns actually has a few brand new abilities. The main one being the melee counter. If you see this flash on an enemy, you can stun it with a counter attack. It's fine as a mechanic, but needing to stop to do it slows down the combat a bit too much. Until you get the stir attack, there's a few common enemies you stop to counter when you could just shoot through them in any other game. It works much better for bosses. The counter keeps you on your toes for an opening to do big damage. It's just the regular enemies where it usually feels unnecessary. Aside from that, you also have these new Aeon abilities. You select them with the D-pad, then press A to activate it, which uses the new Aeon meter that you can find expansions for. The first one is the Scan Pulse, and it might just be the most broken ability in the series. This isn't Prime's Scan Visor. This thing reveals the nearby map and reveals fake blocks in the same area. The issue with this thing is that it tells you too much information. I 100% of this game twice because honestly, when the game straight up tells you where everything is, you might as well. I think a big reason behind revealing fake blocks is that these things are practically unnoticeable on the 3DS screen. Looking for inconsistencies in sprite art is much easier to do than 3D models. I feel that they transitioned the 2D art style to 3D pretty well, but fake blocks are too hard to see. Unless you're playing the game in HD, because it turns out that seeing small inconsistencies is significantly easier when you're playing in 960p as opposed to 240p. Let me illustrate that visually. This video is 720p, but this blue rectangle is the 3DS's resolution. Yeah. You can't make out small details in such a small screen space. Not to mention you might be playing on the original model, which made minute details even smaller. It worked with pixel art because the art was small to begin with. It doesn't work as well with 3D models because you need the proper resolution and texture to see it as intended. Anyway, long story short, I get the intention behind the Scan Pulse, but it kinda ruins the exploration and discovery of Metroid. Again, why bother exploring when you can press a button that tells you everything? I tried my best not to use it this time, but this thing is too damn good. It's hard not to. The other abilities are much less game-breaking though. Lightning Armor makes you invincible and increases the power of your melee counter. Beam Burst makes your beam super rapid fire, and Phase Shift slows down time for everything except you. The armor is the most useful one for me. It essentially increases your health by a few hits during bosses. Beam Burst sounds useful, but it drains your Aeon too much to use consistently, aside from enemies that can only be damaged by Burst. Besides, missiles are pretty good in this game, so you'll likely use those a lot until you get the Plasma Beam. Phase Shift is mostly useless though. It's mainly used for puzzles and getting pickups. But you know, the more I talk about this game, the more you can tell the developers were massive Fusion fanboys. Samus Returns was developed by Mercury Steam, bringing us such classics as Castlevania Lords of Shadow and American McGee presents Scrapland. Okay, what the hell even is that? Wait, this is a game about investigating robot murders? And it's getting a remaster? I was just gonna mention this as a joke, but this actually sounds kinda cool. Anyway, these guys were mostly in charge because they pitched a new Metroid game for Wii U, which Nintendo said no to, and then they pitched a remake of Metroid Fusion, to which they said no again. But Yoshio Sakamoto was so impressed, he was like, why don't we make Metroid 2 instead? The rest is pretty obvious. Samus Returns takes a lot of cues from Fusion. The more linear nature of Metroid 2 made it perfect to turn into more of an action game. You take more damage than usual, bosses have more defined patterns to dodge, and the game gets pretty challenging at times. But the game has a checkpoint system now, so when you do die, you don't usually lose any real progress. Bosses feel like more of an event, too. There's more dynamic camera angles and shots, melee counters that give you a big opening to attack, and sometimes the grapple beam gives you a chance to stun them. And doing that feels super satisfying. You can almost feel Samus just yanking that dude to the ground. It took me a while to get to the bosses. The main ones are Metroids, just like before, and they're easy, just like before, but you at least have to hit the bottom of them now, not just anywhere. Each Metroid even looks slightly different from the other ones. That's a great touch. It kinda reminds me of Spyro Reignited, making all the dragons unique. Gammas are probably the most annoying though, mainly because a lot of them can run away and move to another room and you have to track them down. It's not hard going to another arena, it's just annoying. Like seriously, can you just die? Please. This is where the melee counter was really fun to use. It feels good landing one, and those cutscenes to play while you mash the fire button just makes you feel like a badass. Almost all the fights are totally revamped too. Zetas and Omegas feel like real boss fights now, and they're more than just missile sponges. And finding Metroids is so much easier. You start to hear a beeping sound when you're near one, which I really liked. It builds tension when you find one, and it's just useful in general. But the brand new sections and bosses are where Samus Returns really shines. Like the last normal area on Game Boy was mostly empty with 3 Omegas and nothing else, but now it's this abandoned Shozo lab. There was something atmospheric about there being nothing but these fights, but this new area is more interesting overall. These guys feel like escaped lab experiments instead of hyper-resilient killing machines, but I'll take it if the trip to fighting them is better. There's also this one part with this giant mining robot chasing through this hallway, and it feels like it's from a completely different game, in a good way. It uses your abilities pretty well, and it's a fun test of reflexes. And you fight this dude later, and it's like the hardest, most elaborate boss in the game. It's got multiple phases, and you have to figure out how to fight it, and this fight's great. This kind of stuff gives me hope that Metroid Dread is awesome, because these guys really know what they're doing when they aren't held back to the confines of a remake. I mean, come on, these guys are more than qualified from this scene alone. However, you can still tell this is a remake. Samus Returns still has a lot of issues that the original did. The areas are really samey for one. They do have different themes to them, but many of them still have that giant temple in the center structure, and I didn't immediately notice a lot of similar landmarks to the Game Boy version, like I did in Zero Mission. It could be down to the more zoomed out camera or shift in art style or something, but there weren't very many parts that made me remember stuff from Metroid 2. The areas really could have used unique names as well. I don't know what place is what, because a number is harder to remember than criteria or something. Ultimately, it still feels like you're going through the motions most of the time. Find all the Metroids, kill them, dump their DNA into a gate to lower their purple lava. Okay, I do like that. That lowered lava wasn't immediately obvious before. Now you see it happen, so you know what clearing out all the Metroids do. And I love how they made the lava purple like it was on Super Game Boy. I like what they did with the music too. The original game only really had bleeps and bloops for the most part, but its soundtrack actually sounds like music now. That's a compliment, I swear. Those weird noises that they use for atmosphere on Game Boy has been translated really well here. I wasn't expecting that. My only real gripe with the music is how I can barely remember any of it. They definitely nailed that Metroid ambience, but didn't get the melody right. I love how they're with most Metroid tracks, and you tune them out and let them set the area's mood, but they're still good to listen to when you do pay attention to them. Not here. I can't remember most of them aside from the main theme that only plays once now. Maybe like one song near the end of the game, but that's it. I get that the original didn't have much to work with, but it feels like they could have done better. They also could have done better with the endgame, because once you get all your abilities, the completionist cleanup is a massive chore. The new teleport stations make backtracking much easier, but Metroid 2 is so linear that you never had to backtrack to previous areas. So this is the only time you're really using them. What you would normally do is get most of this stuff as you pass through places you've been before to get to new places, but because you've never been back to previous areas normally, you gotta do all that at once. It took me like 2 hours. And the extra pickups do help, but there's a lot of puzzles involved. It kind of feels like too much at times. Like maybe you're doing these big multi-room puzzles just to get one missile tank, and it's like, can you tone it down a little? The worst part is when you have to do this new thing called a spider boost. Or is it a power bomb cannon? I don't know. It would help if they actually told you about it in-game. And yeah, they don't directly tell you about shine sparking or wall jumping in Super Metroid, but at least there were those optional animal sections that taught you how to do it. In Samus Returns, there's nothing, not even the manual. Basically, you just use a power bomb while you spider ball to a wall, so it's easy to do. You just wouldn't think to do it, which makes a few pickups feel impossible to get because you didn't know you could do this. There's no speed booster in this game, so I didn't understand how to get this stuff my first time playing. Going back to previous areas highlights the low enemy variety too. In the final area, you're still fighting the same enemies from the beginning of the game, but now they're stronger. Sure, it was like that on Game Boy, but that was Game Boy. You really couldn't come up with more enemies to fight throughout the game? It probably would have helped with the repetitious structure that they couldn't really change that much. Sometimes, though, they changed too much, mainly in the final area. There's so many enemies in this place that it gives the polar opposite vibe that Game Boy had. Before, you were so deep in the planet that Metroids were the only things resilient enough to survive down here. Now it's this action-packed fight to the Queen, and it feels like something was horribly lost in translation. Even after you kill the Metroid Queen and befriend the baby, it's no longer this tranquil walk back to your ship. Because the baby Metroid could eat these rock things, right? Well, this is essentially a new ability, and using it is required to get a few pickups. Seriously, you beat what was originally the final boss, and you're still going around getting more pickups. There's too many pickups in this game. I'm tired of collecting this stuff. Please calm down. But that new Metroid Queen fight is kind of awesome. Before, it was super simple. You shoot missiles up its mouth and bomb the insides. You still do that, but there's way more attacks to dodge, and figuring out how to avoid them is really fun. Like, it blows wind at you, so you avoid it by spider-balling to the ground. That's so cool. It's not something you immediately expect to do, but it's so obvious when you realize. And you land the finishing blow by power-bombing the insides. Man, does this fight kick ass. The new final boss, not so much. Because you go back to your ship, and everything looks dark and ominous instead of tranquil, and Ridley shows up out of nowhere. Metroid 2 was the only game without Ridley, so it was cool at first, but the more I think about it, he doesn't have much reason to be here. He could have found out about Samus's mission, sure, but why even bother coming here when he can just kidnap the baby later when it's less guarded? Whatever. He's actually kind of hard unlike most of his fights, but it's otherwise a fairly standard boss that really didn't need to be here. I would have preferred if he was a boss somewhere else in the game and not just right at the end, because as far as I know, you can only damage him with a beam, so by the off chance you save the final cleanup for the very end, it's pointless. Why get more missiles when I can't really use them anymore? I've never really felt like 100%ing Metroid games because I know I don't need the extras. But hey, if you want to make the final boss even easier, that's your choice. But in Samus Returns, it borders on pointless aside from energy and Aeon tanks. Seriously, why should I waste my time getting the rest of the missile tanks when the final boss can't be hit with missiles? But anyway, the game ends the same way otherwise. Samus brings the baby to the Federation, the last Metroid is in captivity, the galaxy is at peace, all that garbage. But the end screen doesn't show your completion percentage, which is so weird to me. You can view it from the main menu, sure, but it just feels so empty without it. Oh dude, there's a post-credit scene showing the X-Parasites coming out of hiding, I love that. Remember, don't mess with the ecosystem. Samus Returns has more difficulties too. Zero Mission had a horde mode, but I just didn't mention it. And I wouldn't really mention it here either, but there was also fusion mode, an even harder difficulty that plays with a fusion suit. It's really hard from what I hear, with some later bosses even killing you in 3 or 4 hits. It's a nice addition with one glaring flaw. You need an amiibo for it. That is very hard to find. Amiibo spoofing is pretty easy nowadays, luckily, but hiding a cool new difficulty behind a figure that scalpers buy up before you really have a chance to get one is beyond stupid. They're still doing this too. It's infuriating. At least give us the option to pay $3 instead or something. You know, assuming it's not a quality of life improvement that should be in the base game to begin with. But I'll get to Zelda one day. Overall though, Samus Returns is not a very faithful remake. Whether or not you like that would be preference, really. It's better than the original, that's for sure, but I don't know. Samus Returns feels like one of those games that could just be better. The new content is awesome, and it made plenty of good improvements to the controls, but it goes a little overboard near the end. The action-y feel doesn't really fit Metroid 2 as much as Fusion, which you can tell was a big inspiration for them. Because in a vacuum, Samus Returns is amazing. But when you see it's a remake and it takes away some of the nuance and the source material, and it's just pretty standard when you compare it to most of the other games in the series, Samus Returns is just that for me. A standard Metroid game. You'll have a blast if you've never played one before, but feel mostly over by the end if you've played just about every game in the series. Because that's the weird thing about Metroid for me. The more I play it, the more I appreciate it. But not Samus Returns. I played Zero Mission twice in a short amount of time and had a blast on both occasions, and after learning about all the sequence-breaking stuff from it, I was tempted to play it again. If I replayed Samus Returns again right now, I'd probably be sick of it halfway through. I can have my fun with it, but Not very often. It's almost too much. Still, a standard Metroid game is pretty great, and that's enough to satisfy me. But hey, if a slightly botched Metroid 2 remake means we get an amazing Metroid 5, I can easily accept that. And if it can't, well, next time we're looking at another Metroid 2 remake. Until then, take care, and I'll see you all next mission.